Hello and welcome to the Blue Room Weekly with me, Dave Downey. I'm Peter McFarlane with you for the next, I don't know, half an hour or so. It depends what we end up talking about because it's a bit of a different, free themed podcast. This because we've asked you what you'd like us to talk about as the World Cup continues, but we're just over 3 weeks away from Everton returning. So whatever it is you think about it, whether whether they completely destroy us and make us all feel awful about football again, or whether there is some light at the end of the tunnel with Frank Lampard and the boys getting back underway on Boxing Day against Wolves at Goodison. Like I said, plenty of things to talk about, various different things to talk about. So we'll sort of get over the list as we go. But I'll start by asking you this, Pete. I mean, the World Cup, we're 2 weeks into just under 2 weeks into the World Cup. Have you found it all? And we'll go into the Everton related stuff in a sec. But what have you felt towards it? Because personally, I wasn't looking forward to this at all. I thought it was ridiculous that it was this time of year. But as it turned out, and I think many Everton fans are like this, it's decent to have a bit of a break away from the Blues, given the way it all sort of ended in this mini first half of the season with those two defeats at Bournemouth and people starting to call for Frank Lampard's head. I mean, at least he gets a break away from things as well, which I don't think is any bad thing. But then with the World Cup, I was like the Qatar issue, all of the different controversies there are with it being in Qatar and whatnot. But have you felt about the tournament itself? Because I think in the last couple of days the games have really ramped up and there's been some really good ones to watch.
Yeah, I mean it has been a strange one. Obviously, I mean, ideally you want the World Cup in the summer for obvious reasons. Mainly for me is the fact that I just hate the fact that our season's been interrupted. Obviously, our bread and butter and the thing that we love the most is watching Everton Football Club. So to plonk a World Cup in the middle of a season, for me is it just takes away the shine from the entire thing. I think we were saying before we came on about how it just doesn't feel right. Normally the World Cup's in the summer for a very good reason. It's so you can enjoy it. When we don't have any football on, we can really get into it. You can really enjoy it. I've been quite indifferent about this World Cup, to be honest with you. I haven't said that. I've watched a lot of the games. At the end of the day, football always shines through. Quality football will always interest me. There've been some great results. Last night the games were absolutely crazy. All of the connotations of who could go through at one point. Spain and Germany were both going out. Obviously, Germany ended up going out, and Spain went through. But it's as I say, football will always shine through. Quality football will always shine through. But for me, I'm still very indifferent about the whole thing. It doesn't feel like a World Cup to me, to be honest. It just doesn't feel. It doesn't feel quite right. That I'm watching the games with the heating on and wrapped up in
Yeah.
jumpers.
Yeah, that's the thing about it, isn't it? With it being in the middle of winter, especially with the playing it as well in 40-degree heat every single day and whatnot.
Yeah.
And obviously with the controversy that goes around it, it's obviously been well documented as well. Given the LGBT stance and stuff like that, and there's various stories I think you hear almost daily that are going on over there. And I personally feel it's a bit of a nasty debate. Nasty is probably the wrong word to use, but it's an uncomfortable discussion that people are having.
Mm.
When I've seen so not only celebrities but also pundits and whatnot in football that have said, well, you've gone over there for a particular reason, and that is to try and promote one love and things like that. And look, it's everybody's choice. It's a horse for course, isn't it? How you feel towards things like that, like anything in life, really. But the thing that it does create is it creates difficult conversations for people to have towards what it is. You know, do you just simply say, well, it's their country? I've seen a lot of people say this, it's their country, so we have to respect how they feel. Or do you take the stance that it's basically the human rights side of things that our country thankfully have? And again, I know there's a controversy with that, isn't there, with what the current government and whatnot have been speaking about in recent years and Brexit and everything like that. But At the end of the day, my personal opinion is it shouldn't have been happening there, let alone to have happened in the winter anyway. That's a part issue, but given the way it came about, given the corruption that happened with FIFA, it actually standing there, and then for Sepp Blatter to come out and say, yeah, it shouldn't be held there anyway, when he's the one that caused it with the levels of corruption. I still want to watch. A lot of people have pointed it in my direction. The documentary about FIFA that's on
Oh, it's brilliant.
Netflix.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
seen it? Have you, Pete? Yeah.
Yeah, but I've seen it. Yeah, it's really. I mean, it does open your eyes to the whole process, and it wasn't just the Qatar bidding process. It was also Russia. It was there was. I
Mm.
mean, the sort of corruption that goes on in FIFA goes back years, and you can see. It's a really good watch. I won't spoil it for anyone, mind you. You can look up for it, but everything about
Yeah.
it anyway. But it's definitely worth a watch. And it's even interesting to see something that which I hadn't appreciated was Sepp Blatter's rise to power as well, and how he actually got in there in the first place, and sort of some of the backstabbing and some of the manoeuvring that was going on in the background just for him to get there in the first place, and then obviously for him to then continue, and then his clinging onto power as well. And all of the different things, and I think a lot of it wasn't necessarily to do with, payments or anything like that. I think a lot of it was to do with just maintaining power, just holding on to power, and trying to get the most influential and most most influential people on side just to cling on to power. It's definitely worth a watch for anyone interested in football, or even people who aren't interested in football. It's a really good watch.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection of the way the world is in terms of
Yeah,
like global MPs and leaders and things like that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching that, certainly over Christmas
yeah,
anyway. Yeah, I mean, I suppose, well, the other side of it is with you saying there rightly that the corruption's gone many years of FIFA, and you think about the time when what was it now? It's supposed to be a long time ago when England were trying to bid for the World Cup to come to our country.
mm,
And when they had the voting process, I'll never forget being in work and watching it as they come in. And like England were favourites, even with bookies and whatnot, England were favourites to get it. And then when they did the voting stuff, England got the lowest amount. I think England got like one vote out of the 20 to 30 odd different votes that they got from the different like CONCACAF and all those different types of
yeah,
authorities. They all had to get their own vote, and then I think that's when it started. The journalistic, there's been some fantastic work that happened with it,
yeah,
where journalists are looking undercover at how this actually happened, and essentially it's just these people who lead the authorities from different continents, are essentially being bribed to vote for a particular type that somebody suggests. It essentially goes to the highest bidder. And look, there's loads of fascinating work about that. I don't want to bore everyone with the political side of stuff, but it is well worth looking into. Now let's move on a little bit. Well, to what the juicy stuff, as it were, as most people I think will be trying to listen to with us with Everton related things. Yesterday, something happened that a lot of people will have felt is inevitable. A lot of people will have frowned upon, and a lot of people will be scowling at today. And that is that Belgium, not, and I'm not saying anyone's bothered with Belgium going out, the top ranked side in international football went out to Croatia, and they're out of the World Cup. And their manager, one that we're very familiar with, lost his job. Couple that with what I said at the start of the show, the views towards Frank Lampard are starting to get a little bit higher, that people don't want him at the football club. I don't think he's going to be there too long at the football club. Automatically, I think that we get drawn to the fact that there's an Everton related manager, player, whatever, and people start talking about this. And look, if nothing else, and if it's not tangible, which I don't think it will be anyway, but you start linking it between the club, and it is Roberto Martinez, obviously, who was sacked, former Everton manager, and a lot of people saying, do you know what, they could actually see it come to fruition that he ended up back at Everton. I mean, it's the first thing everyone looks at. You raise your eyebrows and you laugh at it and think, nah, that's never going to happen. That, but again, this is Everton. This is Everton who hired Rafa Benitez. This is Everton who hired Frank Lampard. It's Everton who hired Sam Allardyce with Sammy Lee with him. This is not beyond the realms of possibility in my opinion, that he could. I don't think he will ultimately, but it's a food for thought for many people thinking that he ends up, or Bobby Brown shoes ends up back at Everton if Frank Lampard goes. I mean, surely that's not going to happen, is it, Pete?
Oh, please, God, no. I mean,
Well, to be
I'll
fair,
be
there's
honest.
worse. There are worse. There are worse out there. We've been proof of that, haven't we?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, look at what we did though, Dave. Like, Machiri came in. I mean, at a time where I think just about every Evertonian. I was at the Sunderland game, the last game under Roberto Martinez,
Well,
and
so
I've never
Machiri
seen that.
sacked him. I think we need to state that first, didn't he?
Yeah,
Machiri was the person that, well, whether he sacked him or not is by the by, but he was ultimately at the football club when he left,
yeah,
wasn't he? When Martinez left.
yeah. He wanted to come. He wanted to bring his own person. I think at that stage, as I say, that Sunderland game was probably one of my lowest points as an Evertonian. Genuinely, just being in the away end, it was. There was probably only a couple of hundred of us there, and you know that Everton sell out every away, and it doesn't matter how badly we're playing. But this was just something else. I think we got beat 3-0 off the top of my head. We got absolutely battered anyway. Remember Lee Cattermole looked like prime Pirlo in that game. It was that bad. And I just remember, some of the
He was
banners.
Sam Allardyce in charge of them, by the way. There's a bit of irony, isn't
Oh,
it?
I didn't even realize
Yeah, he
that.
did. He
Oh
kept
God.
them up when that night they beat us 3-0
Yeah,
because that was Martinez's last game, wasn't it? It was.
yeah,
Yeah, it was. It was that was just after the FA Cup semi-final
yeah.
saga, where we lost to Man United with Anthony Martial scoring just before extra
When the
time.
players just ignored them for the second half and actually went out in that and had to go.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, we had all sorts of injuries that game, but anyway, to go back to what you were saying there, that Sunderland game, I think that was his last one, getting beat 3-0 by them, and that again, ironically, was when Allardyce is dancing around the the pitch after they've confirmed survival in the Premier League. I mean, that was a dark, dark day. That was, wasn't it?
Oh,
Yeah, and surely you'll have ended up going to that, won't you?
yeah. Well, that was it. I was there, and it was just it was being in that crowd was, as I say, it was one of my lowest points as an Evertonian because it was just horrible to see how empty the away end was. The fact that obviously I remember it being a night match as well. It's a big old trek up to Sunderland as well. And the couple of hundred of us who were there, it was just horrible. There was no atmosphere, no one bothered singing. It was just a case of take your medicine and get through it. And I just remember coming out to that game. It started off so well under Martinez. Let's be honest. But I think it's been alluded to so many times that he had the David Moyes defensive stability and he added a bit of attacking flair, and it just worked in that first season. But once he'd sort of trained out that defensive solidity, that was trained out of the players. We were just in free fall, and I really do think that the problems that we have now did start with that time, because under Moyes we were such a consistent performer in the Premier League, and he obviously had a sort of maybe punching above our weight slightly in terms of money spent. But we did have that solid base, and we seem to have a solid dressing room as well. And I feel like it all started to go downhill under Martinez, and then obviously it's got progressively worse as we've gone along. But I just think it'd be crazy. I mean, imagine the fact that we sack him just before we start spending really big money, then we spend all the money, and then we bring him back to for what? I think it'd be. I think we'd be massively struggling to stay in the Premier League if Roberto Martinez came back. I just think, again, I mean, I'd I'd love to think, to cling on to that first season that he was there, but I just don't think that we've got the solid basis for him to come in and add anything to the side. And I also think that it doesn't matter which manager comes in right now. I think what we need is players, and I think any manager in the world would struggle to get a tune out of some of these players at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of moving on a bit, because obviously people don't want us to bang on about Roberto Martinez, and the 2 seasons that followed that really good one that he had. That was our best finish in the Premier League, sadly, 72 points, which normally I think in every season the Premier League's existed, bar one or two, would have got you into the Champions League. But no, with our luck being as it was, Arsenal finished above us and we ended up finishing fifth. And then there were two
Everton, that.
seasons. Yeah, exactly. 2 seasons of absolute limbo under him. But to move aside from him, what you've just mentioned there about if you're on the side of we need to get rid of Frank Lampard, I mean, I think I think there's a bit of an asterisk that needs to come with those people who I'm one of, say, oh, we've got to stop sacking managers. We've got to stop doing this over and over again, trying to start year zero and things needing to change and whatnot, and what time of a year you do it in the middle of a season. I do think that there's a bit of there's a fine line between, look, are we seriously going to be in and amongst the relegation battle again? That looks like it's going to be the case, given that we've only won 3 of 15 games to start the season. You look at the signings that we've made, a few blow hot and cold, more cold than hot, certainly, in my opinion. But you get to that stage where you're thinking, well, yes, you're absolutely right. In the context of itself, we have made far too many managerial changes. I think that's a fair thing to say that most people would agree with. The reason why that's been the case, you can argue until it goes dark about why it happened, and that has a lot to do with the board, the owner, all sorts of different ways. And we've said this a lot on the Blue Room in recent years, sadly, because it's not something you really want. You wouldn't want our club associated with, but the way people point their fingers in different directions, that there's no wrong answer, in my opinion. The way people do say, well, it's Brands' fault, it's Steve Walsh's fault, it's Koeman's fault. Now we're getting to the turn of the wheel where it's Frank Lampard's fault. Shortly, I believe that it'll come to it's Kevin Tellwell's fault, because he's the guy who sorts out recruitment now. There's a bit of an ambiguous issue as well, where we don't know what certain people are doing at our club, and it's never really been said to us. It's sort of a guessing game for many of us to ultimately conclude their opinion. But when we get to Frank Lampard now, where I see people saying that they want to get rid of him because all necessary means you need to have a manager that keeps us in the Premier League. I'm not so sure Frank Lampard can go about doing that again. Does he deserve to stay? Well, those results, most clubs, I think, would sack a manager. But I have a lot of sympathy with him. And again, maybe this is me being a little bit soft when it comes to this, because I've had so many fans, so many listeners who've said to me, no, Dave, you've got to get rid of him. You've just got to cut the tie with him and start again just to get us saved. Now, that's obviously the priority, is keep us in the Premier League. That's where I'm a little bit twixt in between everybody, to be honest with you, Pete, because I feel that changing for a manager at this stage, you're almost certainly not going to get a new manager in that is one that's going to stay for a particularly long time, i.e. what we did with Allardyce. And the main sort of sliding doors moments I think many would agree with was Ancelotti when he left to go back to Real Madrid. Had we kept him, Everton, we could be looking at the sun right now. Do you know what I mean? Thinking that this is Everton at the best. We're in the Champions League and whatnot. I'm almost certain that we'd be feeling more towards that end of the spectrum than we are right now, looking at the doom and gloom of what's going on with the club. But I mean, how do you feel in general about Lampard and how this plays out? Because obviously we've got a January transfer window to come as well. The next, well, let's get through the World Cup and we get back into playing on Boxing Day. Then onwards, I mean, that next month from when the transfer window starts in January. I mean, how important is that? I mean, that's ridiculously important for what we can do, and I'm not so sure we were able to do it or have the tools to do it.
Well, that's it. I mean, we need a spark from somewhere, straight away. When the season's gone by, I remember, when I first got my season ticket 25 years ago. I remember, we seem to pull someone out of a rabbit out of the hat every sort of January. I remember when Kevin Campbell signed and banged those goals in and kept us up. I think he only signed in March, to be fair. That was before there was a January transfer window. I remember
It's a bit mad those times, wasn't it? Because a lot of our younger listeners, you remember a time when there wasn't a transfer window and there wasn't a deadline. There was a deadline, but it wouldn't be. People would just be half-arsed about it because it'd get you to like you say, March, and there'd be a deadline, and then there was only a few games until the end of the season, and then it reopens. The transfer window, in inverted commas, wasn't the structured lingos that they are these days. In terms of you get to the start of September, and then you don't get anyone till January, and that's only a month.
I think the reason why they stopped that was because there was teams who basically just go out and buy. Like I remember, like when Man United were fighting with Newcastle for the league, and they just went out and bought Andy Cole.
Yeah, and
Like,
loans as
it was,
well. You could almost. Am I right in thinking you could probably get a loan at any point as well?
yeah, yeah. Well, because they still have emergency loans now, don't they? If you have like a goalkeeper crisis or whatever, to stop like one of the kids having to play in goal. But yeah, it was a weird sort of time, wasn't it? But I just remember, even a player who probably doesn't have the best reputation amongst Evertonians, Mikel Madar. To be fair to him, he
Oh,
actually got some really crucial goals for us
yeah,
in
he
that
did.
97-98 season. He wasn't a quality player, but I remember it was Blackburn at home. He scored a goal, which again ended up, as it happened, that 3 points was massive in keeping us in the league. So
Yeah.
I just feel like,
I think
we
Palace
do just
away as
need a
well. I've got in
spark
my
from
mind,
somewhere.
Pete. Palace
Yeah.
away
Oh
as
yeah.
well. I think
Yeah, yeah. Well, Joe Max Moore as well. Joe Max Moore
Joe
came
Max
in,
Moore,
got a few, but you know what I mean. Even these players, sometimes they don't even have to be the best players in the world, but
Brian
sometimes
McBride.
Brian McBride, yeah. See, there's all these
There's
examples of
always the odd
players.
one or two that creeps in, isn't there?
Yeah, but unfortunately, then you've got the likes of like John Spencer and other
Yeah,
players who don't quite do the business. But as I say, you've got, we do need a spark from somewhere, and whether that comes from the academy, or whether that's someone who can step up, the likes of Tom Cannon, who's banging them in for the under
yeah,
21s, under
yeah.
23s, and he's, he got his goal in that game in Australia as well. That might give him a bit of confidence. We need a spark from somewhere, and sometimes, you sort of, you stumble across someone who just brings that little bit of spark. And I'm still of the opinion that, it only takes a couple, a 2 or 3 game run, and you're going right up the table. All of a sudden, if we get to February and we're sort of, looking at mid-table, I think we'd take that. We'd be looking, we'd be quite confident. When you look at the likes of Leicester, who looked absolutely dead and buried, a couple of games ago, 3 or 4 games ago, Leicester have a little run of form, and all of a sudden they're looking up rather than down. And there's others, I, I still think that the league is that tight that it wouldn't take much for us to actually start looking up rather than down.
Mm.
And I am of the opinion that I would still keep faith with Frank Lampard. I think with any young manager, there's going to be peaks and troughs. I think. But like you said, I just don't think we can keep changing managers. I really don't. And maybe that's the naivety. Maybe I'm being slightly naive there, but I personally want to stick with him. I've got faith that he could keep us out of trouble. But as I say, that, like you said, January's massive, not just because of the transfer window, but because of the fixtures. Maybe getting drawn away to Old Trafford in the in the FA Cup might do us a favour if we can. Well,
Yeah.
either we pull out a performance out of somewhere which gives us confidence, or we end up out of the FA Cup and we can just concentrate on staying in the Premier League.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think as well. I'm of the opinion with that sadly, just get rid of it as soon as you can. Just get rid of it as soon as possible here, because there's a priority that is staying in the league. Unfortunately, we're talking about that at another quite ridiculous time of year, when we're not able to look in the new year like everybody does, with the optimism, and think, oh, Everton will get sorted. The brighter dawns are ahead of us if we stay in the cup and all that. Fact of the matter is, we're 17th in the Premier League. We're out of the Carabao Cup as well, after being humiliated by Bournemouth twice in the space of 4 days, and also in the Premier League. You then play Manchester United away in the FA Cup. United aren't United they used to be, but they're certainly the United that are capable of doing us an absolute show, like they did in the home game when we won 1-0 up, and then barely had a shot on target after that, and United went on to win the game 2-1. And they had a bit of a crisis with the Ronaldo saga they've had. I think there seems to be a different point throughout this season where I'm looking at it thinking, it can't be that bad, can it? It can't be that bad. We can't lose to these in that sort of way, i.e. the Bournemouth ones. And then I'm looking at it thinking, do you know what? This is actual crisis. And with actual crisis comes the changes that many people want to see. There'll be people listening to this right now who are absolutely fuming with what you've said there, Pete, about I have confidence in Frank Lampard. I think as well, there's a, like I said, I think sympathy comes along with that, because you think about what he took over from with the Benitez issue, to keeping us up. I mean, sadly, that's one of the best, the biggest, I say, achievements again in inverted commas, staying in the Premier League, and that game against Palace at Goodison when we were 2-0 down. many fans, the younger fans anyway, that's the biggest thing they'll have seen at Goodison Park, which is so sad. And I think I'm at a stage now where I'm like, well, I can't even start thinking about, oh, how do Everton start winning trophies? Oh, it'll be 29 years pretty soon before we've won in 95 and things like that. And I just want stability at the club, because that seems like it's such a far way away from us having actual sympathy. The trouble is, whilst we say these mass changes that the club will need, doing it in the middle of a season, I don't think that's the way you go about it. Look, if you get to a stage where we've got a hard run of fixtures, haven't we, when you get back in? We've got Wolves at home, that's a 6-pointer because they're below us in the relegation zone. Then we go to City on New Year's Eve. Then I think we have Brighton. We have a run of I think 2 or 3 home games in a row, with that one against United away in the FA Cup in between. I can understand why people are thinking, well, that's too crucial a lineup to give Lampard the time to sort this out, and that he should have already been sacked. Many people think. Um, I'm in limbo personally. I don't know if getting rid of him is enough to have the confidence and guarantees in my mind that Everton can sort this out if they did get rid of him, if you get what I mean. Do you have the faith in the board and Machiri and the transfer window coming up? Do you have faith that the football club can sort that out by getting rid of Frank Lampard? It's almost the lesser of two evils, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you keep Lampard, well, do we stick with him and he just about keeps us up? You willing to run that risk again, or are you willing to you have to put faith in the board and the owner to sort this out? I'm of the opinion that I don't think I'd want to put our faith back into that board and the owner to sort this out, both in the transfer window. And again, I'm taking Thelwell out of that because obviously he's only been here for what, 6 or 7 months. I'm taking him out of that equation there. I think that I'm sort of leaning towards the scales of we have to keep Lampard in. I say have to. We should keep Lampard in, and just hope this changes, because I do think it's slightly the lesser of the two evils. Because again, we've just discussed the connotation of getting a new manager in. The other thing I want to talk about, sort of in the next few minutes, is what we've seen at going back to that World Cup. Obviously, Onana's out; he's going to be back in the country and training. Also, we had, funnily enough, in Australia, who were absolutely flying in the World Cup. Although I'm not too sure how much further they're going to get. Who is it Australia they've got?
Do you know what? Let me check. This is what happens when you don't really pay much attention to the World Cup.
Argentina, isn't it?
Oh, Argentina, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too sure they're going to last too long there, because Argentina look like they finally got their act together, and by qualifying, I know they lost to Saudi Arabia, didn't they, in the initial shock, but they look like Messi and whatnot. It looks pretty destined for me to see them against France. I'm not too sure how people think England will get on. But anyway, going back to what I was saying there, Everton were over in Australia, a couple of games out there. The one against Celtic looked like a complete waste of time. And look, I understand that there's a PR thing, isn't it, to do? There's a job for that to do when they go over to Australia. But I haven't looked. Well, I've looked at it obviously and sort of seen reports and seen the games and whatnot, but I don't think there's too much I've seen from that have really given me any confidence of what we have to go with when we come back in for that game on Boxing Day against Wolves. I know you mentioned a couple of the youngsters who look like they're definitely getting into the condition of being ready to play in the first team. I've started to think now a little bit ahead, far too ahead, aren't I? 3 weeks away tomorrow when we play Wolves, but I look at the squad we've got. James Garner's out for a while, isn't he? We still have to sign a striker at some point. I'm not sure where Dominic Calvert-Lewin will be in terms of condition. I mean, what sort of team are you looking at now, looking ahead to that one? And again, we've still got to have our Christmas dinner before this happens, haven't we? And so of all them. But It's not Frank Lampard must still be looking at this, talking to Paul Clement, talking to Ashley Cole, talking to all the lads there in his coaching staff, and thinking how do we solve this, and what sort of lineup and squad are we looking at playing against Wolves on Boxing Day.
Yeah.
You've still got Cody to come back. He's had a long winter with England, even though he probably won't play, or he might get on a few minutes or so, but I don't think he's going to play. And obviously Jordan Pickford as well. It feels like there's a lot of trees in our way before we get to the Open. What are you feeling like the team's going to look like when we get back in on Boxing Day?
Well, to be honest, Dave, I mean, I look at Everton and to use like a Christmas analogy, because of how weak we are in forward areas, and in terms of our our total lack of any kind of potent attack. It's like a Christmas dinner without the turkey. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that's the only way I can describe it. So I feel so sorry for Lampard because of the fact that we just don't really have any kind of spark in that final third at all. So yeah, I mean, it's all dependent on Dominic Calvert-Lewin, whether he's going to be back fit. I don't know actually what the latest on him is. I know that he was. They were talking about late December. Whether he'll make Boxing Day, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's at the moment, Dave. I am absolutely. I'm of the opinion that our back line with Conor Cody and James Tarkowski, regardless of some of the more recent performances, I still think that we've got a solid basis at the back. With Nathan Patterson coming back in, and he'll obviously be a lot further down the line in terms of getting to full fitness. Vitaly Mikalenko as well. Ben Godfrey's been playing for the under-21s. He's been getting some match fitness back as well. So hopefully he might be ready. The back line doesn't really concern me as much. The midfield, Anana, it's great to see that he's come through the World Cup unscathed. He'll be getting back early as well after Belgium went out yesterday, so that's good news for us. It means that he can have a good couple of weeks back in the squad. I'm assuming he'll probably have some kind of break now, but he'll be able to integrate himself back into the squad. Obviously Ghana's still in the World Cup, so he'll be playing against England only this weekend. But yeah, I mean, James Garner, obviously with him missing now for a couple of months, let's be honest, he hasn't really made much of an impact, hasn't really had much of a chance. So whether, I don't think we'll miss him necessarily, although he probably could have been a player who could come in and make an impact. When you look at the sort of more forward players, Dwight McNeil, Anthony Gordon, Damari Gray, Neil Maupay, they just don't really fill me with any kind of,
No.
There's not one player there who if I was playing against him, who I'd think, oh, you've got to look out for him. Anthony Gordon might maybe, with a little bit of a break, he might maybe rediscover some form. He's managed to get a hat-trick over in Australia, yeah. But even so, I think he's got a lot of work to do in the second half of the season to prove that he's good enough to be talking about major, big contracts and big moves. He's got a lot of work to do to get back to that form that he showed last season. But yeah, I mean, I'm sat here thinking, the only sort of possible spark, I think, of anyone who could come in and be a bit of an unknown, I'd have to be looking at some of the younger players. I would say the likes of Tom Cannon, even Stanley Mills, players like that who can come in and make some kind of impact. I thought the Bournemouth games would have been perfect to have played them from the start. I really thought that was a missed opportunity. The fact that we got battered anyway, we played a reserve team of players who've had hundreds of chances playing for Everton and have failed miserably. I didn't understand why, if we were going to play a change side, we didn't give some of those youngsters some proper first team experience. But hopefully, going away to Australia, integrating themselves in the first team, and obviously getting on the score sheet for Tom Cannon and getting some minutes for other players, hopefully that'll put them in good stead. And that's all I can hope for at the moment, Dave. For me, that's all I can hope for up until January, is that if some of these young players can step up and provide a bit of a spark, because I don't see it. I just don't see it in any of the players that we've got. Obviously, last season we had Richarlison, who, regardless of form, you knew that he always, he could pull something out of the bag. He could do something. He could drag us over the line. I don't see anything in these players that we've got in that, sort of final third. I just don't see it at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you. But the thing about bringing younger players in as well, you'd like them to have a far more easier way of sort of dipping the toe into the Premier League, and how that's going to happen given the toxicity that could be possibly around the club at that time, and given the situation we're in, given maybe changing a manager and whatnot. So that remains to be seen. But these lads are going to have to have quite the bottle to step in at that level, at that stage and things. Let's finish the show by talking about Everton Women, who've, I don't know, Pete, in recent weeks, I've felt when I've seen them that they haven't been rewarded what they've probably deserved in many of these games. Certainly watching them at home to City, they've had a few unlucky decisions. Some of the refereeing's been quite appalling as well. I think we both agreed on that, haven't we? In recent weeks, how do you feel things have gone? Because I don't think the WSL table reflects the way in which Everton have played, the way the players they've got, and what the manager's done since he's been at the club.
No, I don't think it reflects it at all. Certainly, when you look at the fixture list that the fixtures that we've had as well, it always tends to happen with Everton Women for some reason. Every single season, we tend to have a block of really tough fixtures. Like they're never actually spread out over the season. We tend to get like 4 or 5 fixtures in a row where we're playing like all the top sides. So we had the Chelsea game at Walton Hall Park, which, to be honest, we were well in that. We managed to get back into the game early on in the second half. Got an equaliser to make it 1-1. And basically, there's no other word for it. Chelsea they cheated their way back, back ahead in the game, with one of the most blatant dives you'll see all season, which kind of reflects on the desperation of Chelsea in that game, and reflects on how well Everton were playing at the time as well. But again, it was a game where we went toe to toe, and Chelsea at the top of the league at the moment. But that was a game where we easily could have taken at least a point. Manchester City as well, another game where we were right in it, right, up until the end. Again, we managed to get the equaliser against City. We seemed to be, we were playing well. We were keeping possession. We just couldn't quite do it in the final third. And I think if there's any one criticism that I could, sort of say at this stage, although it is early days still, one criticism would be that, again, in that final third, it's kind of like a broken record just talking about Everton teams, where it's not quite clicking in that final third at the moment. But having said that, we do have the quality in that side. The difference between the men's team and the women's team, I would say, is that I actually have confidence in the forward line and the players who are playing up front in those forward positions and wide positions. We do have goals on that side, but I think it's more to do with we just need to have more confidence in ourselves and to start really expressing ourselves in that final third. Sometimes it feels a bit like we're trying to keep possession for possession's sake rather than being proactive and sort of taking it to the other team, getting the ball in the box a bit earlier. But I think that will come. I think that'll just come naturally as the players adapt to Brian Sorensen's playing style.
Certainly to this season, obviously with the women's team, and what's going on with the men's side, you'd look at both clubs if you weren't aware, if you just this is your first day of getting interested in Everton Women or Everton Men, for that matter. Given you look at the league tables for both of them, you think, these sides are absolutely struggling this season. But that's not. It's been the case with the men, as we've spoken about quite heavily throughout this podcast, of course. With the pod that you do on the Blue Room as well. I mean, I think there's a lot more optimism of what this side is capable of doing with the women's team. And I think you're right. I've just been looking back through the fixtures there. They just come in clusters, don't they? Of like, look, even this week, for example, Arsenal away tomorrow, and then Man United away in the WSL Cup, and then they'll look more optimistically towards Brighton away, and then Spurs away is the double header before the cup returns at home to Durham. This all happens before before Christmas, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah,
And then there's a proper winter's break, isn't there, when it comes to the women's side of things? Because then we don't return until 22nd of January at home to West Ham. So then they actually get a fitting break, don't they, for that time across the festive period and whatnot. But
yeah,
the other thing I wanted to ask you about is you've been to a lot of the aways. I mean, I think Matt's been to all of the aways this season. The last one was actually a really good 3-0 win against Sheffield United.
yeah.
That was in the group stages of the WSL Cup as well. That's gonna fill them with a lot more confidence when they're coming back to. I mean, it's going with due respect to Sheffield United. It's going from one end of the side to the next, isn't it? When you're going away to them, and then which was what last week, wasn't it? 22nd of November to
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, to Arsenal away
Yeah.
tomorrow. Arsenal are one of the big sides in the WSL. They won all sorts of trophies. They've got world class players. Look, we're not going to sit here and chat on about Arsenal are one of the best sides and all that, but the fact of the matter is that they are. Everton going away there is going to be a really tough game. But what have you seen in that game at Sheffield United, in that performance at home to Man City, even though we lost 2-1? There was still a lot of good things. Like you said there, I think there are bags of goals in that side that isn't reflected by the results that we've had.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, for with the Sheffield United game, again, it was a frustrating first half, but we did create a lot of chances. But we went into the break at 0-0. But eventually, the class sort of shone through. But what was great for me was just to see some of the players who got in the score. She catches Snoise, scored, Dutch international. That's her
Yeah.
first goal for Everton. She's been unlucky. She had a big chance in the derby, which where she sort of got put off a chance. She had another big chance against City, so I think she's been desperate for a goal. So hopefully that'll fill her with a lot of confidence. As I say, Dutch international, score goals wherever she's been. So I think that was massively important for her. Jess Park as well. It was great for her to get on the score sheet. She wasn't able to play against Man City with it being a parent club, so it was great for her confidence to get in the right position at the right time. And then Hannah Bennison as well. Hannah Bennison, another young player,
Yeah.
another great up and coming young player, one of the hottest properties in Europe. To be honest, one of a really sought after player. So it was great to see her get on the score sheet, and hopefully that'll give her a big boost in terms of confidence. But again, I mean, with Arsenal, Arsenal are missing a lot of players as well. Unfortunately, Beth Mead's just it's been confirmed that she's got an ACL injury, so she's going to be out for the rest of the season. Big
That's
shame
horrendous.
for not just for Arsenal but for the Lionesses as well, with the World Cup coming up next summer. It looks like she'll miss that. But they do have a number of players who are missing in that Arsenal side. Leah Williamson. Having said that, they've still got so much quality. There's they're only 3 points off top with a game in hand as well, so they'll be looking to try and bridge the gap towards Chelsea at the top of the league. So yeah, they're a very dangerous side. They've got so much quality throughout, very hard to break down, and they're obviously incredible in the final third. Like Vivian Miedema, for example, is one of the top forwards in the women's game, and she always seems to score against Everton anyway. But she's always such a dangerous player, even if she's only half fit. So yeah, it's going to be a tough test. But I just feel that with going away to Sheffield United, regardless of the fact that they're in the league below, they obviously showed a lot of fight. They were determined. They were they were very tough to break down. I think that we can take a lot of confidence from that game and hopefully move on into the. We do have a very tough run of fixtures now, like you've said. I think we've got 5 games between now and the break,
Well,
between now and the Durham game. So
there's 4 games between now and the 14th of December.
yeah,
So it now's the chance. If I'm not, well, all of them are away from home.
yeah,
Which is not great, is it? If you want to go along and watch the women play, which you absolutely should do, and it's been brilliant at Walton Park, hasn't it? Getting there, and there's been loads sold out as well. So I'd encourage
yeah,
anyone as soon as they can get your tickets, to the fixtures. Obviously, if you're season ticket holder, it's absolutely free, isn't it? So, why wouldn't you want to go down and watch them? Because the level of football is absolutely brilliant.
yeah,
And I want to talk to you a little bit about Jess Park because I think she's looked like an absolute starlet since I've seen her play. Obviously, she's only on loan from Manchester City, so she wasn't allowed to play against them in that 2 defeat a couple of weeks ago, Pete. But she hasn't actually played for us. That game against Sheffield United was the first time she's played for us since the 30th of October. And then since the 30th of October, she obviously hasn't played a league game until then. She looks crucial to how we do this season. And the other thing as well, I mean, and look, it's not as accessible as it should be. The WSL, we bang on about this quite a lot, and on your podcast as well. It needs to get into the limelight as it did. We spoke to Sue Smith about this quite a lot as well, didn't we? Where they need to capitalise on what England did, the Lionesses did, winning the Euros last year and all that sort of thing. And I think it is still getting there, like I just mentioned to you then about the crowd sellouts and whatnot. But you get to the stage now where what do you believe in terms of the way in which the way in which Everton run the women's team, because there's been a lot of changes over the recent years, hasn't there? This season, to me, as somewhat of an outsider, certainly compared to yourself and Sarah, who you do the podcast with as well, it looks like things have got into a much more positive situation where it looks like the club can actually kick on and find more success in the WSL and whatnot. Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that we need right now is probably like the men's team, is the fact that we need stability. Last season was we had such upheaval with the changing of managers. We ended up with 3 managers in one season, which is far from ideal for anyone. This season was more about having a bit of a reset, and again, with the boost that we've had from the Euros victory for the Lionesses, obviously that's translated into sellout crowds every game so far this season at Wodenhall Park, which has been great to see. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what the work that the club's doing, I still think that we're probably not able to compete financially with some of those top sides like Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal, even Man United now. Their sides are.
What a surprise as well that it's those clubs, the traditional clubs in the men's game. But in terms of the finances, and I don't know how much you'll know about this, but I've had a few chats about this with people in work and whatnot. The actual financial output you've got to put into running a top class women's team isn't actually that much, is it? They don't actually have to put that much out. Certainly not compared to the men's anyway, which is obviously no surprise to anybody, but financially running a top class women's team, women's club is not, the cost of it isn't what you'd necessarily think it would be to get to that top level.
No, absolutely. I mean, you could probably pay the full wage bill off the from the wages from one top men's player. You know what I mean? It's I personally see, this is where I look at it, and this is where I think that if there was any criticism you could level at Everton Football Club as a whole, is that I genuinely don't feel like it would take that much for us to really compete with some of the top sides. Absolutely. In terms of percentage, like when you look at some of the money that gets thrown out on absolute bang average players in that men's team, and even not even just the one transfer fee, for example, Neil Maupay's transfer fee. If we had that money to spend in the women's team, just that one transfer fee, if we had that much money, we'd win the league. We'd probably win the Champions League within 2 years. It's that simple. It genuinely. I mean, in terms of the actual financial backing, I think that the club can do a lot more. I think that this season we were probably held back as well. The fact that with the Megaphone deal, which Megaphone were the women's sponsors last season up until the Ukraine invasion, and obviously Everton cut ties completely with Megaphone. I think that has held us back in terms of there's a bit of a gap in our finance, in terms of our funding. But as I say, I just look at it and think, surely, with all of, bear in mind that, women make up 50% of the population of this country. Like, let's invest in the women's side. Let's really push it. Let's try and encourage people to get down to Wodenhall Park and get down to away games. Let's try and get some of the games at Goodison Park, and let's really push it and try and sell out. Because at the end of the day, when the game's growing, it's going to be growing. It's growing already. It's growing exponentially. The success of the Lionesses obviously have a really great knock-on effect. But now's the time to really jump on it. And there's other teams who are gonna be doing this, who are going to be jumping in. Newcastle, for example, they're going to start investing heavily in their women's side. We need to be ahead of the curve. We need to start investing now because, unfortunately, we're at a point now where Everton have always been at the forefront of the women's game up until probably 4 or 5 years ago. We were really sort of at the top, and then Manchester City, probably before that, came in and sort of took a lot of our top talents. The likes of Jill Scott, who's just when I'm a celeb. Alex Greenwood. A lot of players left Everton in a big chunk, and we've never really sort of got back to that top. At the top table in the women's game. I think now is the time that we really need to start to start investing, because otherwise we'll get left behind again.
Well, and in turn of that as well, you've got to look at the responsibility of the club to sort this out, because look, no, I don't look at the club and think, you know what, this is a little bit of a, oh yeah, just sort of push them by the side a little bit because the men's thing's more important and whatnot. Look, we understand the men's side of it. This podcast, what the Blue Room stands for has always been Everton men's team, but obviously we're doing and giving you the job to do so, which we're so grateful for, is you promoting and pushing the women's side of things. And there's so many people you work alongside who are, who need to be championed so much at the doing this sort of thing to make things go bigger and better on the women's side of the game. The other thing I'd suggest as well, though, Peter, is that there needs to be, I wouldn't go as far as saying a pressure put on the football club, but it needs to be questioned all of the time, constantly. I think having those open conversations with fans, the things they've actually not done that many people will criticize on the men's side of things, they have an opportunity here, like you've mentioned there. There's a window open for us to really kick on, and I think there should simply be the club being put on demand to provide us with answers to the questions we have, because they could also learn from this too, and what they should be able to do with the entire club, not just the women's team. But they have an opportunity to be open about this and be able to say, well, we're not putting finances in this particular area, this particular factor of the club, everything down to Waltlow Park, building it a bit bigger. If we're starting to get sellouts, then we need more seats. Everything from that to what they're paying out on top class players, because it's a professional game. Do you know what I mean? It's a professional sport.
Yeah.
And again, we were having a good discussion with Sue Smith about this. That being able to get to a level that we're not sort of, yeah, it's good, but it could be so much better in not the hardest thing to do in the world, is it?
No. Well, again, that's the thing, isn't it? But you've got to have that commitment, and you've got to, the club have got to. As I say, Everton in the women's game have always been trailblazers. They've always been at the front, and they were one of the founding members of the league, and they've always been a club who've set an example. When you look at the Lionesses squad, who won the Euros in the summer, there's so many players in that squad who at some point came through Everton, and I just, when this is, for me, this point now is where the men's team were when the Premier League came in, and Everton were sort of regarded as one of the top teams, and unfortunately we were just left behind in the shadows.
You just don't want it to be an afterthought, Peter's more the point I'm making. Do you know what I mean? It's just, and it's really straightforward, and maybe perhaps the criticism of the football club is very long-winded, and rightly so, given, I mean, we've spoken about a lot in terms of managers, signings, everything that we're all able to bang on about, like I said to you, until the day is dark. But the side of it with the women's thing is getting the women's side of things is getting so frustrating now. I think we are at the point where that would it be fair to say that window's starting to close a little bit, because other clubs, like you mentioned, Newcastle, Man United as well, they've kicked on to be one of the top sides in there. I think Chelsea and Manchester City have been doing it for a lot longer, but I think those, as an example, you look at Newcastle, maybe they're a little bit of an individual case given the finances they get from the levels at which they get and the places they get it from. But with Man United,
below as well.
Yeah, exactly. You look at the sides that are doing well. It doesn't have to be an automatic. Oh, they've got loads of money. Yes, there's a financial issue, but a Premier League club, it's a fraction of the financial clout they have. to make a successful women's league club. I think that's probably an appropriate statement to make about it all, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, ironically, last season when we the summer before, it was Savar Ismailov, I think his name was. It was Usmanov's nephew. He'd come in, and we'd started splashing the cash. And obviously, then he left Everton. And with him seemed to go some of the investments, obviously with the Megaphone deal and everything, sort of got fallen through. That was obviously another sort of gap in the finances, I'd say.
Yeah.
And ironically, when we actually went out and spent the money, we didn't. It sounds very familiar, doesn't it? We didn't spend it very wisely. So we ended up buying players in positions that, numerous players in the same position. Again, sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And again, that's why it's, I think this season we're taking a more of a reserved approach, if you like, in terms of we haven't spent big money, but the quality of the players that have come in has been exceptional. And I think that maybe that's, that could possibly be the way forward. I think that Brian Sorensen, he's got a lot of respect in the women's game. He's brought a lot of players through, a lot of top players through during his time in coaching and managing. So he's a very well respected coach. And again, he's got such a great knowledge of certainly in Scandinavian football. Some of the players that he's brought through on free transfers or on loans, it's been phenomenal. It's been fantastic. And going back to sort of the likes of Jess Park, the likes of Aggie Beaver Jones, these are players who want to come and play for Everton, and a big part of that will be because of Brian Sorensen and his influence and the fact that they can trust him to nurture them at a key point in their careers. So I think it's getting the happy medium, because at the moment I'm looking at this side and looking at the potential that we've got and looking how exciting the future could potentially be for us. But the flip side is that it wouldn't take too much to really take the next step and to really push on. And we've got to show that ambition, and it's got to come from the top, and this isn't in terms of the top, in terms of the GM at Everton Women. I think that the people who work within Everton Women are as ambitious as any of us. They want the best for the club. They want the best for this team. But I do want to see, if there was any kind of criticism I could throw level at Everton Football Club as a whole, they need to start putting more investment in. They need to really start, because like we've said, it can't be an afterthought. We can't miss the boat again. The men's team missed the boat on the Premier League. It's taken us years. We've been left behind in the shadows. This can't happen. We've got an opportunity here to not be left behind in the shadows. We can really make a big mark on the WSL, but we just need a little bit of investment. And as I say, a little bit, a fraction of the investment that the men's team would get.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the best way to end the show as well, definitely, I'd implore anybody to have a look at that. And look, you want more young people involved, you want young girls involved in it, to get involved in football. The Lioness winning last year is just the catalyst of what could actually happen. And let's hope it continues, and let's hope Everton do the right thing, which they haven't done. Maybe if those people in charge of the football club, those who are in charge of the coffers and the investments and whatnot, actually, when they think what they're actually thinking about the men's team, do the exact opposite for the women, and we might actually go and succeed. But yeah, brilliant talking to you about the women's side of things, and of course earlier on in the podcast that what's going on with the men's team returning on Boxing Day against Wolves at home, which obviously wasn't the most easiest of discussions given what's happening with the club and what we think may happen going forward. But yeah, stick with us at the Blue Room, because we've got loads of stuff coming up to Christmas, loads of fun things happening as well, little quiz things, competition stuff and all that. I'll bring you more information about that as the weeks go on, and in the next few days. But also got a really exciting thing to announce, which you'll have already seen on our social media if you've had a look at it, that we're going to do live shows. If anybody's who stuck with us for many years, which there are a few thousand people who have, when we initially started the Blue Room back in the day on Radio City over 10 years ago, when I started what we have there, obviously it was a live show on a Wednesday night at 6:00. Obviously, Pete, the way in which we do podcasts these days, and YouTube and whatnot. The technology's evolved a little bit now. We're not trying to be dinosaurs. We're trying not to be dinosaurs anymore, and get back onto the fact that we'll get guests on and people who can actually talk to us and have debates and all that sort of thing. There's that thing that they do, what is it, the Spaces thing they do on Twitter. I'm not so sure about that. It gets a bit hit and miss. But with our subscribers, we're actually going to be doing live shows every single week with debates. We want to hear your thoughts on everything. So hopefully it's well worth it, and give it a try when you hear it. It's going to be coming up in the next few weeks when I've basically made sure that I know what the technology is like, and I can actually click a button and it works. But yeah, there's loads of that to come, and obviously more with Everton Women having so many games coming up in the next few days up towards Christmas 17th. My birthday is the last game of this year until it comes back in January. I think I'm right in saying there, Pete. That's
Durham,
at home to Durham, isn't it? Home to Durham. So make sure you get along to that as well. And say hello if you see us all. You'll always see Pete shouting things around there. Not nasty things, and there's no swearing.
Join in. That's the other thing I want to say
exactly
to everyone. Join in.
Yeah. Join in, get involved there. We've got drums and everything. The atmosphere is great. Get involved as much as you can, and we're normal people, so just say hello if you do see any of us there. But Pete will always be there, as will Sarah. She's one of the nicest people and nicest faces you can see in your life. So say hello, have a good time, and go and support Everton Women as well. So we'll be back soon with the next weekly, obviously, which will be next week, hence the name, and loads of stuff coming up on the Blue Doom Extra as well. So we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to us, and thanks to you, Pete, as well.
Cheers, Dave. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, everyone.